So we're here at the Okanagan Nation Alliance to interview Tessa Terbasket.
Hi, Tessa.
Hi.
Hi. So can you tell us about yourself and how you became involved with the Okanagan Nation Alliance? What's your role with the ONA?
Yeah, so my name's Tessa Terbasket. I'm from the Lower Similkameen Indian Band, which is part of the 7 communities of the Okanagan Nation. And so the Okanagan Nation Alliance is the tribal council that represents these 7 communities. And how I came apart, I was a summer student about three summers ago. I started within fisheries. So I was out on the water and the land, helping with the harvest, and I just fell in love with the job and became full-time. So I'm currently the harvest coordinator for ONA Fisheries.
Awesome. How did the collapse of the traditional salmon fisheries affect the Syilx people as a society?
So the collapse was absolutely detrimental to our people, to our way of life. The Okanagan people were known as the salmon people. The salmon is one of our 4 food chiefs, which kind of means that it's the creature of the water, and it gave its life for the people to be, so that we could live, I guess. And so the 4 food chiefs is kind of like our creation story, and it teaches us how we live amongst the land and with the water in harmony, and it's the land, because the land looks after us, we have to in turn look after the land. And so when we talk about this level of interconnectedness, that when the salmon populations are hurting or they're facing disease, or when with the creation of overfishing, over commercial fishing in the United States in the 70s, and the construction of the hydroelectric dams, it pretty much made the fish population extirpated up here in Canada, and the effects were catastrophic. Like our well-being, rates of suicide, and all that went up in our communities.
Right. So what initiated the ONA Salmon Recovery Project?
So with direction of our elders and our chiefs, really started to engage in the discussions of how do we bring the salmon back to our people, and how do we start bringing our health and who we are back as well.
Perfect. Tell us a little bit about the structure of the fisheries project. What are the key elements?
Sure, so the key elements, first is conservation, so thinking of the salmon's well-being first and foremost. So our main goal is getting as many as possible back to their spawning grounds. And that's one thing that we do have up here in the Okanagan for an inland fishery, is that we are, like the Okanagan sockeye, are Okanagan because the spawning grounds are in our territory. So that gives us strength of claim when we start talking about dealing with like government relations and just getting, I guess, support for funding. We have that legal framework behind us. And so after conservation, then we have, so it's our food, social, and ceremonial purposes first. So feeding the 7 communities is our first mandate. So 90% of our total catch goes back to the communities, which is a huge success for us, right? Because that's feeding the people, and it's really us leading in food sovereignty, which is huge.
Really important these days, yeah. From your knowledge, what kind of relationship does the ONA share with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Ministry of the Environment? And also, are the ONA involved with public fishing regulations?
Yep. So we have a pretty good working relationship with both DFO and the province. Because to get the salmon back, it took a lot of cooperation first and foremost. So that was working with governments on both sides of the border, so DFO and then also the state of Washington and the federal government of the states. And what was the rest? Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sure. So what kind of relationship does the ONA have with DFO and the Ministry of the Environment? So obviously it's a working relationship.
Yes.
Cooperation. And we're also wondering if ONA is involved with the BC's public fishing regulations.
Yes, we are. So, and when you say working relationship, it definitely is. Like, it's not easy. Like, it definitely has its struggles.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of negotiations and meetings that take place. But when we start talking about, so that strength of claim piece, as well as out of the Sparrow case, that's when, so under the Supreme Court of Canada that we won Aboriginal fishing rights as like a way of life. And so having both of those pieces kind of gives us, I guess, a stronger voice for input. As well as, so within ONA we have the most on staff, the most hired biologists and scientists for a First Nation fishery in Canada. And with our past government and like the muzzling of the scientists, and they had to let go a lot of DFO staff. That meant that we had the most up-to-date like science and data. So that also gave us a stronger voice when talking with both the federal government but also the province, which is huge.
It's fantastic. So how important are the hatcheries in ensuring salmon stock recovery?
So the hatcheries are huge. We can see from this previous summer, there's been record numbers of Chinook salmon returning up the Columbia and Okanagan, and a big part of that's been because of the tribal hatcheries along the Columbia, mostly are Chinook. So we're seeing huge success rates with that, and this past spring we opened up our first hatchery here in Penticton on the Channel. We did our first sockeye fry release with that this spring. So we're not quite sure yet on the exact number of recovery will be from that, but we're hoping that it's going to be high.
Awesome. So they're like pretty integral and to like. Do you think that without the hatcheries that you would have the rate of success that you're having if you didn't have the hatcheries?
I think, well, with sockeye, it's definitely, I think they're starting to become needed with like when we're starting to think of climate change, and we're starting to into a realm of adaptive fisheries management. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking the success rates, like nature does take its course, and we've been seeing runs come back in like the 300, 500,000s without the hatcheries. But when we're thinking long term, I think they're definitely important.
Okay, so in our research, we've noticed that the Okanagan peoples have a really strong relationship with the land and water, both spiritually and as resources. Can you talk about this or perhaps share your own experience?
For sure. So as Sylph people, like I was saying earlier, the way we live our life and our values that we get from our stories, our chaptik, as well as like the For Food Chief story. Is that my phone? So you can just like, they teach us that on how we live amongst the environment, and those key principles of when we think of also how we live amongst ourselves and our families and our communities. That's where it starts out first, and then it ties into the land. And it's, without those principles, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So when we talk about the salmon and the water, like we talk about that being like the lifeblood of our people, right? There's that interconnection piece, and so when one hurts, we also hurt as people, and we fully won't. When we talk about reconciliation here in Canada or even in the Okanagan, that truly won't happen until we as humans and everybody in the Okanagan starts reducing our human impact on the environment and the water, because they're tied, like there's no separation.
What's been your most significant experience or accomplishment working with the Okanagan Nation Alliance?
I think the most significant, there's been two pieces. The first is when we do our community distribution of the salmon during the summer, and you're feeding the people and you're bringing them the catch. There's something that's truly special about that, and just seeing how happy that makes community members and elders and the youth. And the second piece is, so I get to do a lot of different youth work and engagement in my job. And we had this one day with one of my programs where we specifically focused on water. And we talked about the importance of ceremony in water, but as well as we had special teachings and trainings for young people who were, I guess, coming of age, like becoming adults, and that they would have to go to the river every morning when you're coming of age and jump in and swim for a whole year, so even in the winter time. And with my group that we were teaching this, you're never sure if the youth are actually listening, but it was a couple weeks after that, one of the parents, sorry.
No worries.
So it was a couple weeks after that, one of the parents came up to me, and one of our teenage boys, Wesley, she's like, you'll never believe it, but Wesley's been going and jumping in the creek every day since your guys' workshop. And he did that for a couple of months. And this was like early, starting in February and March. So very cold, icy waters. And just to hear that he was doing that, because he kind of struggles in school and following those types of rules, I guess. But that truly meant, that was really hit me deep, that we are doing the right work for our community.
Beautiful. If you could say something to youth about their role in protecting Okanagan salmon as well as the land and wildlife in general, what would it be?
Just to start speaking up, and that their voice is important and it needs to be heard. And a lot of time that's something that they don't have the confidence in their self or their own culture or teachings. But when they do speak up, it's very powerful. And the role youth play in our communities are also huge, and they need to be lifted up and recognized more. Like even us, like we are youth, we're very innovative, creative, and we're kind of like action doers, I guess, once we get our minds on something. Like we can be very passionate, and especially today, youth are so worldly, right? We're so connected on like social media and Facebook and Twitter that something you post could be received and heard from someone across the world or across Canada, right? So it's very easy for us to start social movements, I think, and we're starting change. So I really encourage the youth I work with to do that.
Can non-Okanagan people get involved with the Salmon Recovery Project? And if they can, how?
Totally. We're always looking for volunteers. So right now we're even looking for volunteers for our habitat restoration projects. So going out and doing plantings and of like traditional indigenous plants. As well as we have this Okanagan Salmon Community Initiative during the summertime, where recreation fishers or really interested people can come and volunteer and also help with harvesting and tagging opportunities.
Cool. So bringing back the salmon is helping to restore the ecosystem of the Okanagan, with many species benefiting. What are the future hopes and direction for the Salmon Recovery Project?
For the future salmon?
Yeah, the future hopes and directions.
Right now, we're really looking critically at how can we protect water for fish. So we really need to be thinking especially in this previous year with the drought, and we're heading into another winter of El Nino, and so we're predicting similar conditions next year, that water for fish really needs to be a priority here in the Okanagan, else they can't spawn, and that's our main purpose of the fishery program, right, is getting the fish back. But as well as, I think it's going to take a lot of engagement, because we as people also need water, and you get a bunch of different stakeholders, so like the agriculture and like the cattle people for their hay. But it is possible. Here in the Okanagan, it's crazy. We so abuse our water that we have. Like the average Okanagan resident uses 695 liters of water per day, which is ridiculous because the average Canadian's like 390 something. And we do live in the desert of Canada, so that should alarm everyone that lives here.
Yeah. There's definitely a false sense of water abundance
There
here.
is.
People don't understand the concept of water budget, and
Yes.
that if you go below a certain level on the lake, you're actually mining the water.
Exactly.
So that perhaps
And, like,
education is a major part.
Huge part, and I also see that's like a role that our youth can play. It needs to be more known in our education systems, especially so our own values, our story. So many people in the Okanagan don't even know that the salmon have returned, or there are salmon in our waters. It's just ridiculous sometimes, but. And in the Okanagan, because we are such a dam system all the way up the Columbia and Okanagan, and in here that the water levels are controlled. So if we are in a drought, it's not something visual you would see, like the lakes still look like they're the same they've always been, right?
Thank you for sharing your time with us, Tessa.
Sure.
We
Do you want me
really
to?
appreciate
I just
it.
realized when I was talking earlier about the principles of the ONA fisheries, I kind of missed the other points.
Oh, by all means, please. If there's anything else
Sure.
you want to talk about, please do.
Sure. So as I was saying, so the first two are so the conservation, getting the salmon back to the spawning grounds is our first priority, and then for food and social and ceremonial purposes. But we also have a small economic fishery, and our goal is all the profits from this economic fishery goes back into the program and funds, let's say, these habitat projects. So recreating spawning grounds, so putting recurves in the river that we have. It's called Ori, so in the Okanagan River at Oliver, and now we're starting to look at projects on the Penticton Channel and other places. And then the next piece is, I think that's it after the economic. But as I was saying earlier, like the importance of ensuring water for fish. And so right now we're trying to work with the province on really getting sockeye and other salmon species a priority here in the Okanagan. So right now we're trying to get sockeye into Okanagan River. So the last dam, I guess, that they can't cross is at the top of the Penticton Channel. And right now the province is opposed to this, and the main reason that we think that is so there's a kokanee population, and there is scientific concerns on, I guess, what the effect the sockeye population will have on the kokanee. But sockeye do bring in a lot of good for the surrounding environment. They're kind of like a pinnacle species, I guess. When you have sockeye, then you kind of know you're kind of having a healthy ecosystem. And it's kind of back to those principles of returning the watershed to how it used to be, right? Because the sockeye would, and other salmon species would go into Okanagan Lake.
So if they traditionally went there, and kokanee are landlocked sockeye.
Yes. Yeah, it's the argument sometimes. I'm like, really, why not? But there's so much more tributaries in Okanagan Lake, as well as it's a colder lake than Soyuz and Skaha. As well as, so the main reason that we think the province is currently against this is, so Kokanee require half the stream flows in tributaries than Sockeye do. So that would mean harsher water restrictions for the District of Kelowna, which is already hugely over allocated in their licensing.
Awesome. Great. Do you guys have any other questions you want to ask?
I think that was covered really well. Yeah, thanks a lot for
Thank
your
you
time.
so much. You were amazing.
And also I can ask more to my supervisor about